West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
For an institution that relies on the public believing and trusting in its integrity and honesty, today a seemingly, potentially important step. The Supreme Court of the United States announced that it has adopted a new code of conduct, a move it seemed forced to make following the extensive news reporting over the past several months exposing allegations of ethics lapses by some of the justices. At the center of those reports, Justice Clarence Thomas, who was gifted expensive trips from a billionaire friend and Republican donor named Harlan Crow, who incidentally also purchased the property that the justice's mom lived on and that Crow renovated, all of which Thomas did not disclose. Justice Sam Alito also did not disclose a pricey trip he was gifted years ago from a billionaire friend, which brings us to today's news. The highest court in the land putting in writing that justices are required to, quote, uphold the integrity and independence of the judiciary and, quote, avoid impropriety and the appearance of impropriety in all activities. The introduction to this new ethics code provides this context, quote, the absence of a code, however, has led in recent years to the misunderstanding that the justices of this court, unlike all other justices in this country, regard themselves as unrestricted by any ethics rules. To dispel this misunderstanding, we are issuing this code, which largely represents a codification of principles that we have long regarded as governing our conduct. Despite that proclamation, what the code is missing is any way to enforce the ethical standards the justices insist they've always abided by, but we, the public, seem to have a different perception of. As Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of the Judiciary Committee responded this afternoon after this news broke, quote, an updated ethics code with no means to enforce it still leaves a gaping hole for mischief. This court, and this court alone, the supposed guardian of due process, still exempts itself. That is where we start the hour with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. So I will admit to feeling emotional when I saw this. Yay, they're listening. They read newspapers. They've seen Senator Whitehouse on television, and all of the sort of Cuba Gooding Jr., Tom Cruise, you know, from Jerry Maguire, help me, help you, has gotten through to them. But even their statement feels like it's us that misperceive their ethical lapses. Tell me your thought of today's news.
Well, it's a really strong signal from the court that they get how badly their standing has fallen and how serious the legitimacy crisis is that they are experiencing. At the same time, they also try to say that this is, for the most part, not new, and it's largely what we've always done, and nobody should really worry. So, you know, they're a little bit spongy about that. The important thing here is that while they've said, okay, we're going to adhere to the rules of baseball, what they have not said is, and we're going to allow umpiring. We're going to keep calling our own strikes. We're going to keep calling our own base running, whether we're safe or not at second, irrespective of what the facts are, with nobody neutral having a look at it and with no serious fact finding. That's the big hole that remains, and that's where the work remains to be done. And I hope that the court will see that and move on to that next step of deciding, like every other circuit court of appeals, here's how we're going to enforce our code of ethics.
Let's keep the baseball thing going. It does feel very significant, though, that they've agreed to play baseball, right? Like on a field with bases and to wear the uniforms. Do you think there's any opening here to talk about umpires?
Yeah, I think that there is. I mean, they have said in their announcement that they're looking to the other courts for advice on other measures. What those other courts have is the process for making a determination about whether a justice has broken the rules or not. And it's super simple stuff. It's not super complicated. It's where's the inbox to file the complaint? It's who sorts out the crazy complaints for the legit ones. It's who does the investigation and fact finding for the legit ones. It's once you have the facts, who compares them to the rules to see if the rules have been followed, and then who tells what the result was. That's all super simple stuff, and all other courts do it. So I think there's a real pathway for them to follow if they can suck up the courage to defend their institution by doing it.
I will draw my time in the Republican Party to explain what might be going on inside. I imagine the folks that were for this step feel like they just climbed Mount Everest, like, oh my God, we got the naysayers, to the peak, and you want more. What is in your view sort of what is sort of the balance that you have to do as someone so steeped in all these issues and with the court?
I think there's a lot less balance here than the court seems to perceive. It's not hard for the court to decide here's where the inbox is for complaints. It's not hard for the court to hire people to sort through them and to hire staff attorneys to do basic investigative work to determine what the facts are in relation to a complaint. It's not hard to set up a panel of very distinguished federal judges to say, guys, we've looked at the facts and we've looked at the rules and they don't line up this time. Just want you to know that if this were our court, we'd call a foul here. This would break the rules. And to make that report public so that everybody knows that there was an answer at the end of the day. It's very simple stuff. Other courts do it. They can too. And I think while there is that feeling of, phew, we just summited Everest, and I think there's some really reluctant people who don't and we're not going a step further. I do think it's inevitable that they have to go that next step further. Now that they've adopted rules, they have to have a mechanism for enforcing them.
And I assume it's not, let me just read what is in it's called the Supreme Court Ethics, Recusal, and Transparency Act of 2023. It requires Supreme Court justices to adopt a code of conduct. It creates a mechanism to investigate alleged violations of the code of conduct, which is what you're describing. It improves disclosure and transparency when a justice has a connection to a party or amicus before the court, and it requires justices to explain their recusal decisions to the public. It does not look like any of this looks backward. Is that your sense?
I think they are very much eager to only look forward. There's a proceeding in the Judicial Conference right now to determine whether they should look backward with regard to the rule about personal invitations from resort owners being treated as personal hospitality. And the larger question of looking backwards, I think, remains very much alive. We in the Judiciary Committee, I believe, I haven't canvassed the whole committee today, but I believe we still want to go forward with the subpoenas. The public is entitled to know what happened, how many gifts there were, from what billionaires, to whom, under what circumstances, organized by whom, and put the story together, because it's an important story to tell, particularly because it bears on the political decisions that the court has been making. You can't separate those two things.
That was my next question for you. Will the committee proceed in pursuing the subpoenas for Harlan Crow and Leonard Leo?
As I said, I haven't canvassed the members yet, but
Yeah.
I think Chairman Durbin is eager to proceed. I certainly am. And our process is to reschedule after the avalanche of obstructive amendments that we got so that we're prepared for it next time and can deal with it and go on to the important vote, which is the one on the subpoenas.
Right. And I mean, in terms of what is in front of the court this term, these questions are very much relevant.
Yeah, they're very relevant. And by the way, we have two of the billionaires already cooperating. So it's not as if we're doing something that's so improper that nobody will cooperate. Right. And the ones we're still looking at are Harlan Crow, who you mentioned, and Leonard Leo, who has been the functionary for the billionaires and was behind the Trump Supreme Court list, and it was involved in and traveled with Alito on his fishing trip and was sitting with Harlan Crow with Thomas in his backyard where the painting was made. So these are people who are deeply, deeply enmeshed with the court right-wing justices.
It is Tuesday, the 14th of November of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, a small scant dash, a mere pinch of hot smoked Hungarian paprika will make all the difference in the world. It always has, and it always will. Okay, got all the taglines. Well, not all the taglines out of the way. There's a few more coming. But, for now. So we're moving on. Yes, and moving on up. How are you this fabulous Tuesday morning? We'll get into the weather a little bit later, but it's a bit misty, almost to the point of a drizzle. And we may be getting some more rain later on this morning, if not already. So that's a good thing. We like that, especially since Oregon used to have rain, and then we didn't for quite a while, and now we're getting it back. Let's just hope it doesn't melt the snow back. You don't want that to happen. Hey, have you heard that Joe has not called for a ceasefire on all those volcanoes on Iceland? I mean, come on! I thought he had some power. What's wrong? He's the most powerful man in the universe, and he has not called for a ceasefire of those volcanoes. Apparently, the delineation or the sinking of the ground in Iceland has been over 2 feet in some places. That's quick. So why? Well, I guess whatever was filling up that chamber of magma is not there anymore, and something's got to give, and it did. So, and that's not the only place with volcanic activity. That is going off the rocker too. Why won't Joe do something? Whew. On a related subject, if the Nazis do take over all that student debt that you got forgiven, you're going to have to pay it all back. Whatever you got, they're going to throw you in a camp. Of course, all those people who defrauded the government over the PPP loans, they're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. Notice how they don't really talk too much about that. Boy, I got to tell you, MAGA got on the gravy train while telling us, you're all a bunch of sheeple. Oh, are we? All right. And I'll tell you, anecdotally, I haven't met a Republican yet in my whole life who wasn't first at the trough to get money that they were whining that the government was just handing out to those people. All right. And you know who those people are to the Republican. We know exactly. Yeah, the attitude I got is that they all felt they were virtuous, good people. And if all those bad people, liberals, are taking money, I got to get some too. Oh, okay. Well, if you're a good moral person, I guess that's what you do. Kind of good moral people I know don't do that. Just because someone else you think is getting something untoward, why do you have to get something untoward? That's not what equality is about. And anyway, it's look, we know exactly why they say it and why they do what they do, predicated upon, I don't know, some people would call it racial animosity. I'm telling you. That's why they don't want you learning that, or your kids learning that in the schools, because, damn, they might become good citizens and actually do the right thing. If everything is transactional and the ends justify the means, then breaking the law means I got mine, so therefore it's okay. I don't think it's because they took church out of the schools that people think like that. Because apparently the people who go to church all the time think like that. Time to tax the churches, I say. Oh, in fact, there was a preacher whining that he's now having to pay taxes. His church is no longer tax exempt, simply because he gave a sermon in which he said that, a vote against Trump is like a vote against God, and you're going to go to hell, and the Democrats are evil, and Biden is Satan, or some ungodly, and I mean that literally, some ungodly sermon. And, that's, when you're preaching from the pulpit about politics, you don't get to do that. Welcome to America, pal. It's about time we taught these MAGA Nazis a few civics lessons. That's right. About time. They got lawyers, though, from the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, Family Research Council, etc., 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 who have been looking for decades and decades and decades, and we're seeing the fruits of their efforts. They figured out how to use our laws against us, just like the Nazis did in Weimar, Germany. Or is it Weimar? No, it's Weimar. The Weimar Republic was rotted from within, and the rot was because of the Nazis jiggering the laws and the rules against Germany. And that's what we're seeing exactly at this moment. And you have no better place to look than their abhorrent interpretation of the Second Amendment. No well-regulated militia involved anymore. It's regulated, and regulations are bad. Really? It's right there in the Constitution. Well-regulated. Okay? Put it in an armory. You want a weapon of war? Put it in the armory. You can muster when you need it. Officers might get a little sidearm. Okay, maybe. Everybody else, hightail it to the armory. Muster up. Get ready for whatever it is that we got to defend ourselves from. That's why the armory is there. Okay. Citizen soldier didn't mean that you get to start your own militia to violently take over the United States of America. You do not have a constitutional right to that. But when you got, proto-Nazis in the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society jiggering our laws and rules against us, they will actually argue that someone who has already been adjudicated as a domestic abuser, beating the crap out of his wife, beating the crap out of her parents, his parents, has a constitutional right to a gun. Okay? Like I said, it's about time we took these MAGA Nazis out to the woodshed
shed and taught them a few civics lessons. That's right. We'll have to correct them. No more messing around. No more wimpy liberal. Oh, well, I don't know. That's your opinion. I guess I have to honor it. No, we don't. You can mock the opinion. And we should be mocking a lot more. Yeah, look at what Ohio's doing. Yeah, the constitutional amendment to enshrine abortion in the Constitution passed by overwhelming majority in the Ohio Republicans because they gerrymandered their way into power. Said, we're just going to ignore that. Simple little people, you think you really know about self-governance. We'll show you self-governance. Are we going to put up with it? No, no more. And all this BS about how they're going to round us up and put us in camps, no way. Just try it. I dare him. Okay. We ain't the Weimar Republic. We are the United States of America. We roll up our sleeves and we punch Nazis. And I'm sorry that there's a knee-jerk reaction to a considerable amount of people, about a third, who think that it's perfectly okay to Nazi all over America. They really wanted to back in the 30s and the 40s, but we didn't let them. And I'll tell you what the mistake was, burying that in the annals of history. That should have been forefront, taught in every history class. The only reason I knew about it as a young kid, because my dad was a history professor. But I gotta say, there were a lot of elements in my family who would bring up the fact that there was a German Bund that was very strong in this United States of America at the time. And they were actively plotting to overthrow the United States of America, but you would be hard-pressed to find any Japanese American toiling away on their farms on, I don't know, the slopes of Dana Point and Balboa, who was plotting to take over the United States in a violent conspiracy with the Japanese government. Okay? Just didn't happen. But it's sort of like how I learned about racism when I was younger. Recognizable ethnic groups get blamed for a lot of things, but if an ethnic group looks like you don't recognize them as being anything other than you. So when you hear about a bunch of Asian drivers being very bad drivers, no one takes into account that the French people actually drive a lot worse. Because I've been to both. How the French survive going around the Arc de Triomphe is some sort of act of God. That's how you can tell God exists. The chaos of that maelstrom and people don't run into each other on a regular basis, my God. Actually, hardly ever. But anyway, if you're, German, you're not going to recognize a French person as being, other. But you will the Cambodian and the Thailand person. You will. Because that's how it works. That's human nature. No, they're such bad drivers. Men always say women are bad drivers. Well, not all men. Yeah, I guess. I'm just saying, those Asians are such bad drivers. Really, are they? All right. Says more about the person making the statement than about the driving ability of whatever ethnic group one is pointing out. And that's the whole point. Okay? Easy to other the other when they don't look like you. That's right. That's why we forget about the Germans in our midst, the Nazis in our midst. Let's put it that way. Let's be more clear. Because there was a lot of Middle America that was full of Germanic types. Okay? Let's be clear. And they didn't all join a German Bund. But there were a bunch of Nazis who were actively involved in trying to overthrow the United States of America, going after infrastructure like electric grids and dams. Sound familiar, huh? But they feared the Japanese people because look at them. You can tell who they are. Lock them up. That's not to say that Italians and Germans weren't locked up, but not of the numbers as the Japanese. Let us be clear. Why was that? Well, like I said, hard to recognize the other when the other is looking like you. And then the problem with Nazis is that then they'll just lock everybody up and figure it out later. And later usually has a final solution to it. It's no longer those who forget history, it's those who don't know history are doomed to make the rest of us suffer their ignorance. Like every single time. I'm tired of it. Oh my. Let us give you an indication of what we have in store for you here in this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we're still in the Bistro Cafe part. Yes, we are. Well, the new Supreme Court Code of Ethics, and you can tell it was written by John Roberts. Well, and I'll tell you why, because it leaves a gaping hole for mischief. And what is part of that mischief? Apparently, old Roberts wrote in a whole carve-out so his wife can continue to make money and possibly influence the courts as long as she has a note from her bosses. She's not really doing that. She's getting money not to influence the courts, okay? She finds people who will do that for her. Okay, so it's okay. Kind of like what she's been doing all along, making a lot of big-time bucks, and apparently some of the other MAGA spouses are involved in quite, shall we say, profitable activity. And then we got the non-MAGA court, like Kagan, who won't even take a bagel from a friend because it might be untoward. 2 tiers of justice right there. On the rest of the menu, a South Dakota hotel owner who was sued for racial discrimination has been ordered by the Justice Department to publicly apologize and step down for 4 years. An Oregon jury awarded a Hispanic man more than $3 million after cops used excessive force, arresting him for trying to steal a car he was fixing outside of his hair salon. Yeah. See, I told you. Others. And arson is behind the massive fire that shut down the I-10 freeway in Los Angeles. After the break, we move to the chef's table where 1 in 3 U.S. Asians and Pacific Islanders faced racial abuse this year. And an ex-Philippine senator who fought Duterte's harsh drug crackdown is free on bail after a 6-year-long detention on fabricated drug charges. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank her for doing so. Across the page to the left is the link to our Patreon site, and if you could help us by becoming a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly sending us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay our bills and continue this powerhouse of resistance as the founders originally intended so many years ago. So thank you to those of you who have been so generous over these many years. It really, really has helped, and that's no joke. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Though I should mention, Kelly actually takes care of the Facebook page. But there you go. Thank you, guys. Follow me on that social media platforms that were mentioned. And also, on Tumblr and Instagram and Facebook. Also, you can find me at Justice Putnam or simply Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary 10 minutes before showtime, and that's where you can find the actual articles that inspire this salon we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. You just can't find them on Stitcher. Where is Stitcher? It's there, but not anymore. You can go, and you'll find out what happened, won't you? All right, enough of that. Let us now get into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and this offering is out of the Associated Press by Summer Ballantine. A South Dakota woman who said she would ban Native Americans from her hotel cannot manage the establishment for 4 years and must publicly apologize under an agreement with the U.S. Justice Department. The federal agency announced the apology last week as part of a consent decree with the owners of Rapid City's Grand Gateway Hotel co-owner Connie Uri, in March of 2022, posted on social media that she would no longer allow American Indians on the property because of a fatal shooting at the hotel involving 2 teenagers who police said were Native American. We will no longer allow any Native Americans on our property, Uri wrote in a Facebook post while offering a very special hotel rate to travelers and ranchers. Well, we're in the Dakotas, aren't we? Now, members of the indigenous-led activist group NDN Collective were denied hotel rooms shortly after her posts. After months of boycotts and protests against the hotel and its owners, the Justice Department stepped in and sued, alleging racial discrimination against American Indians. In a statement announcing the consent decree, Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark described Uri's behavior as hateful, saying it involves and invokes a long and painful history of negative stereotypes against and exclusion of the Native American community. Now, I should just mention that I have relatives in Rapid City, I still do, cousins. My great aunt actually moved to Arizona, where she passed not terribly long ago. Regardless, I would go to South Dakota to work on the family farm, which was smack dab in the middle of the east and west borders of South Dakota, right along the border of North Dakota. In fact, the farm straddled South and North Dakota. And I began to go and work on the family farm at the age of 10. Get this, I would save up my money for my paper route, and then I would buy a bus ticket. It took me 4 days and 5 nights, sometimes 5 days, 4 nights, depending on when I got on the bus. No, it was like 4 days, 5 nights. Always arrived at night. And work on the farm for a couple of months during the summer. And I did that up to the first couple of years of high school. And every time I went there, I was astounded because you have to understand, this is like 1965, 1966. This is when I began. The height of the civil rights movement. And I would go to the Dakotas. And about Wyoming is when I noticed the No Indians Allowed signs. I am not kidding you. Diners, banks, bus stations, no Indians allowed. So this long history of neglect and exclusion is certainly within our lifetimes. Associated Press staff brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. A jury in Oregon has awarded a man more than $3.1 million after a police officer accused him of trying to steal a car he was fixing, and then the cop allegedly used excessive force when arresting him. I don't think it's alleged anymore. Okay? Just saying. That jury award included more than $2 million in punitive damages to Christopher Garza for false arrest, battery, and the use of excessive force in the 2021 incident at a tire store in Salem. Garza alleged in the lawsuit that on September 17th of 2021, Salem officer David Baker grabbed him, shoved him onto the roof of his police car, and handcuffed him with no justification for his arrest. Well, I feel vindicated, Garza told Portland television station KGW-TV. I feel good that justice has prevailed. A spokesperson for Salem, Trevor Smith, said in an email yesterday, Monday, to the AP that the city was evaluating the jury's decision and had no comment. Garza, a barber, lives next door to the tire shop. He was with two other men and working on a car when Baker arrived and accused him of trying to steal the vehicle, according to the lawsuit. Garza said he suffered injuries to his neck, chest, wrists, and left hand. He also underwent shoulder surgery for injuries suffered during the arrest and that he thinks they may not fully heal. I went through one surgery and I need another, Garza said. My arm probably won't work the same ever again. Ruben Vivas, Richard Winton, Brennan Dixon, and Ashley On of the Los Angeles Times contributed to this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The massive fire that has shut down a crucial section of the 10 freeway in downtown LA was caused by arson, officials said yesterday, Monday, as they raced to assess the extent of the damage and determine how long it would take to reopen.
More than 100 columns along the swath of the freeway were damaged, 9 or 10 of them severely, Governor Gavin Newsom said. It's still unclear, pending the results of the official tests at the site, if the entire overpass will be torn down or retrofitted. The situation poses a commuting challenge that LA has not seen in years, with hundreds of thousands of commuters facing detours and heavier than normal traffic. Starting yesterday, Monday, some worked from home and others took mass transit, but many simply endured the delays. The closure caused gridlock in some areas, but there was general sentiment that LA survived the first morning and evening commute without too much chaos, thanks in part to warnings sent to residents' cell phones. The fire began under the overpass at Alameda Street early on Saturday morning, fueled by wood pallets stored there. Although the exact cause of the fire has not been revealed, there was malicious intent, Newsom said at a news conference yesterday afternoon. In addition to pallets, sanitizer accumulated during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic was stored under the overpass and helped fuel the flames, according to sources familiar with the probe. And they weren't authorized to say anything about it, but you know how that goes. State Fire Marshal Daniel Berlant appealed for witnesses to call a tip line with information and noted those tips could be given anonymously. We have identified the point of origin of the fire, Berlant said. He would not provide further detail, saying the investigation was ongoing. Berlant said investigators had dug through the rubble for evidence and canvassed the neighborhood for witnesses. Officials said the property where the fire broke out was being leased by Calabasas-based Apex Development, Inc., which was subleasing the storage site under the overpass without permission from state and federal agencies. The company stopped paying rent, according to Newsom, and had been out of compliance with its lease agreement. We thought it was suspicious when we reported on this yesterday. It's even more suspicious now. Okay, that takes us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Robert Gaines. Even if you are a safe, experienced driver, accidents can happen at any time. Young children are especially at risk for injury and death in a motor vehicle crash. Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz is a researcher with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of keeping children properly restrained in motor vehicles. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you.
Erin, how many children are killed or injured each year in a motor vehicle crash in the U.S.?
In 2013, 638 children aged 12 and under died in a crash, and over 127,000 were injured.
How effective have child safety seats and other safety devices been in preventing injuries and death among children?
Car seats and booster seats are very effective at preventing injury and death in a crash, but the most effective seat is the one that parents use to buckle their kids on every drive.
Where's the safest place for children to ride in a car?
The back seat is the safest place for children to ride in a car, buckled in an age and size appropriate car seat, booster seat, or seatbelt.
How long should a child ride in a safety seat?
Children should use a car seat until they're at least 5 years old, and a booster seat until the adult seatbelt fits properly. The adult seatbelt fits properly when the lap belt lays across the upper thighs, not the stomach, and the shoulder belt lays across the shoulder, not the neck.
Erin, where should parents go in their community to get help installing and using car seats?
Parents can get one-on-one help free of charge from a certified child passenger safety technician. You can find a tech near you at cert.safekids.org and click on Find a Tech. Another option is to check with your local police or fire department.
Erin, where can listeners get more information about restraining children properly in motor vehicles?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov and type in the search box, Child Passenger Safety.
Thanks, Erin. I've been talking today with CDC's Dr. Erin Sauber-Schatz about the importance of keeping kids safe in a motor vehicle. Remember, for children under the age of 13, properly restrain them in the back seat. If you're unsure about how to install or use car seats, check with your local police or fire department. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Robert Gaines for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. It doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. After multiple appeals, Louisiana is getting close to fair congressional maps for the 2024 election, after a November 10th appeals court decision directed the legislature to draw new maps by January 15th. Louisiana's voting age population is 30% African American, yet out of 6 congressional districts, only 1 is majority black, in violation of the Voting Rights Act. After the Supreme Court's Milligan decision directing Alabama to draw a second majority black district, democracy groups had hoped for a quick resolution in Louisiana. But it took 2 more appeals before the Fifth Circuit finally directed new maps be drawn by January 15th by the legislature, or the court would draw the map. A district court has scheduled a hearing to review the map on February 5th. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Governor-elect Jeff Landry takes office on January 8th, and special sessions require a 7-day notice, making the session the same day as the deadline. Landry has already stated he will call that session. Current Governor John Bel Edwards could also call a special session, but has not yet done so. Computer redistricting can be done relatively quickly, and it's likely mapmakers are already at work. Bel Edwards wrote in a statement, "I remain confident that we will have a fair map with 2 majority black districts before the congressional elections next year." We have more on Louisiana black voters' fight for fair maps at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day that the National Federation of Telephone Workers was founded in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, the union is known as the Communication Workers of America and represents 700,000 workers in a wide range of communication fields. Attempts to organize the telephone industry began as early as 1910 by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By the end of the decade, the IBEW had more than 200 telephone unions. Growth in the number of union members in the telephone industry was greatly impeded due to World War I. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson issued an order to, quote, "hereby take possession and assume control and supervision of each and every telegraph and telephone system, and every part thereof within the jurisdiction of the United States." He he placed control of the industry under the authority of the Postmaster General. After the war ended, telephone companies increasingly installed company unions as a way to control their workers' organizing efforts. Their aim was to stave off unionism from outside organizations. Nearly all of the IBEW locals lost their membership to company unions. But when Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, a new surge of independent unionism began in the telephone industry. In 1938, 31 organizations joined together in New Orleans to form the National Federation of Telephone Workers. It was a loose association of locally independent unions. But by 1947, it became clear that the union would have to form a strong national presence to negotiate with the nationwide companies. And the Communication Workers of America was born.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 50s. Showers occurring right now and throughout the morning, then becoming a steady rain during the afternoon. And winds will be light and variable, looking about 1/4 inch for today's rain. Cloudy overnight with lows in the mid-40s, winds light and variable. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, intervals of clouds and sunshine with highs in the low 60s, winds light and variable. Then we'll have, looks like the beginning of a little supposed drying out period, though the humidity will remain high. Just no measurable rain falling for at least a few days. Looks like pollen is rated as none here in the little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 33 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.99 inches. Visibility is at 1.5 miles because we have foggy conditions as well as some rain falling. And relative humidity is high, as I mentioned, at 97%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. The little personal weather station right there at London is registering 50 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 56 and partly cloudy with a wind advisory that could disrupt critical infrastructure. Rome is 67 degrees and mostly cloudy, also with a wind advisory that could impact critical infrastructure. Bagram is 45 and clear. Kyiv is 43 and cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 53 and cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 56 degrees and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 60 and cloudy with a small craft advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 56 degrees and sunny. And New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit, partly cloudy, also with a small craft advisory. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world.
Terry Tang and Lindley Sanders of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Despite ongoing advocacy and legislation to combat anti-Asian racism that arose after the pandemic, about a third of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders say they have experienced an act of abuse based on their race or ethnicity in the last year, including being on the receiving end of verbal harassment, slurs, physical threats, or cyberbullying. A new poll from the AAPI data and the Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs finds 15% of Asian American and Pacific Islanders specifically say they believe they have ever been the victim of a hate crime. About half, or 51%, believe racism is an extremely or very serious problem in the U.S. Let's see, about 2 in 10 Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, that pens out to 23%, say they have experienced being verbally harassed or abused in the last year, and 22% have been called a racial or ethnic slur. About 1 in 10 say they have been physically assaulted or threatened physically. About a third of Asian American and Pacific Islanders say they often or sometimes face discrimination because of their race or ethnicity when applying for jobs. Last month, the FBI reported an overall 7% increase in hate crimes, even as the agency's data showed anti-Asian incidents in 2022 were down 33% from 2021. That seeming contradiction does not surprise Stephanie Chan, Director of Data and Research to Stop AAPI Hate, an advocacy group. We know that Asian Americans are the most likely to not report the crime that they've experienced, Chan said. It's really sobering to see that even when the world seems to have returned to normal after the pandemic, these levels are still really elevated in terms of anti-Asian American hate. The poll of 1,178 U.S. adults who are Asian, Native, Hawaiian, or Pacific Islanders was conducted on October 10th through the 20th of 2023 using a sample drawn from NORC's probability-based Amplify AAPI panel designed to be representative of the Asian American and Pacific Islander population. The margin of sampling error for all respondents is plus or minus 4.2 percentage points.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Jim Gomez of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Philippine court yesterday, Monday, freed on bail a former senator jailed more than 6 years ago on drug charges she said were fabricated to silence her investigation of then-President Rodrigo Duterte's brutal crackdown on illegal drugs. The European Union Parliament, some American lawmakers, and United Nations human rights experts have long demanded the release of Leila de Lima, who was detained as an opposition senator in February of 2017 on what they call political persecution by Duterte and his allies, and a major blow to Philippine democracy. Sound familiar about what could happen here? Let's continue. Duterte's stormy 6-year term ended in June of last year. insisted on her guilt, saying witnesses testified she received payoffs from imprisoned drug lords. Regional Trial Court Judge Jenner Guito on Monday reversed his decision earlier this year and granted the request of De Lima and 4 co-accused for bail while being tried in a final drug case. The 2 other non-bailable drug cases against her have been dismissed. The U.S. State Department welcomed De Lima's release after nearly 7 years of detention on politically motivated drug charges, the statement said, noting that 2 cases already were dropped against her. Spokesman Matthew Miller said the U.S. urged the Philippines to resolve the remaining case in a manner that is consistent with its international human rights obligations and commitments. De Lima immediately called her ailing 91-year-old mother and, with her voice breaking, told her she was coming home. Well, welcome back. Okay, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and boy, is there ever breaking news. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.